you give me the next slide? Thank you. If you remember back on March the 19th, we issued a press release that talked about suspending actions, all soccer activities through April 15th. And that was in response to the governor who came out with a stay-at-home order. We closed after April 15th. But as of now, with the governor's most recent announcement, we plan to pick up operations after April 15th. So should you have a field closure and they go beyond the April 15th time, then NES Soccer stands ready to be able to help you to find alternate places to play. Most of what we're going to talk about today is based on what we currently know and what the last governor's announcement was as far as this social distancing and a stay-at-home order. You will have a chance to respond to questions. We ask you do so via email. Obviously, we don't really have the capacity to do it with this many folks online. But if you do it by email, if you think the question should be directed to George, please do so at his email address, and also at Angel's if you feel like it falls more in line with Angel's responsibilities. And then what will happen is the answers, the question and the answer, will be published. And if you look at the bottom of the screen there, you're going to see that's the location where the questions and answers will be posted after this meeting. So if you want to copy and paste that someplace, that's probably a good idea to do so. Angel, if you'd give me the next slide, please. Know that we take this seriously. We realize that this coronavirus can be deadly. It can cause death in not only young people, but more prevalent in older folks. And yet we realize that younger folks dealing with grandparents are going to be able to transfer that to grandparents should they contract the virus. So we're taking it seriously, but we're also trying to take a very balanced and measured response to how we respond to this serious coronavirus. During the next several minutes, you're going to hear from Angel and George, and I will be sharing an amended approach. They'll be sharing an amended approach to what we're going to do with this spring's Cup and ISL activities. The extended stay-at-home order was extended through April the 7th. What we're talking about now is through April the 15th. And so if I can, I would turn this over to Angel, and you can take us through Cup play, if you would, please.
Sure, thanks, Dave. We're going to just jump right into the details, which would be the reason that most, if not all of you, have actually logged on today. One of the first changes that we're making, actually one of the biggest changes that we're making, is the Challenge Cup prelim date. Those games are just going to get picked up and the entire event moved to finals weekend. We'll play the entirety of Challenge Cup on finals weekend, that May 29 to 31, just like you would any other like invitational tournament, etc. A couple of things will have to happen, or a couple of things we're allowing and some things that'll have to happen. First of all, due to the date change, if there are teams in Challenge Cup, or you have teams in Challenge Cup that want to drop the event because you won't be able to participate because of the date change, you may do so. You just need to, without penalty, you may do so, just shoot me a support ticket and let me know which teams would be dropping out, and you'll get a full refund for that. The note here is I have to know by April 1st if you're going to drop a team out of Challenge Cup, and then we'll get you taken care of. So note then up in the old date, new date section, April 3rd, we'll post some new brackets if we have teams drop out. However that adjusted brackets, we'll post the new brackets. Additionally, in order to play this event all on one weekend, we'll have to split up any group that's bigger than 16 teams, if there are any that are bigger than 16 after, if teams drop out, which would require new brackets. So what we'll end up doing, I don't know if many of you remember, we used to have Challenge Cup play in separate divisions. We'd have a blue division, a white division, and then we were able to figure out a way to get to a single winner. We're going to go back to the blue-white division. We'll just split it up. We'll have multiple winners. so that the kids aren't playing too many games in a single weekend. So that's that change. In order to get it all in on that weekend, we will be reducing the game times for the Challenge Cup teams. You can see it there on the chart. The 11s and 12s will play 25-minute halves. Everyone else will be playing 30-minute halves. We're gonna, I won't be able to start working on the schedules until after the April 3rd date. We post the new brackets, which means we'll get schedules out April 17th now instead of March 31st. Changes the roster freeze date. It'll now be May 8th. It's going to be May 8th across the board for everyone now. That's going to line up for everyone. You'll see in a minute. And then another thing to note, and this is going to be big, I guess, probably pretty big impact, is we've taken great care in the past to manage coaches with multiple teams. Due to the condensing of the events and putting more teams on a single weekend and the different game time lengths, et cetera, and we'll be writing schedules that take place on finals weekend long before we know the schedules from President's Cup and State Cup, who's actually going to be in finals. It'll be next to impossible to manage every coach conflict. Clubs and teams will absolutely have to be prepared this year to manage if their coach has a conflict. They'll have to have an alternate plan to manage that. Right, we'll jump on over next to President's Cup. As probably expected, the 11s and 12s will follow the exact same pattern and timeline as the Challenge Cup. We'll be moving the 11s and 12s down to finals weekend for their prelims. Also, same thing applies if there's a President's Cup team, 11 or 12 age, that must withdraw because of the date change. You can do so before April 1st without penalty. And of course, the club will get a full refund, et cetera. If we have teams drop out, we'll be published in the new brackets again on April 3rd. Puts a schedule release date back out to April 17th. Single roster freeze date now, May 8th. I've explained that. The game times would also be reduced for the President's Cup teams to 25-minute halves, but just for the 11s and 12s. We're still not reducing any game times for the 13 and older, the 13 through 19s. Those will remain the same because they're going to be playing on their regular weekend. They'll still play prelims on the 15th through 17th, okay? Next event here, I got State Cup notes. Probably the biggest change, actually this applies to State Cup and President's Cup, is the self-schedule games will no longer be self-schedule. Due to the fact that different clubs have different facility close dates or different club close dates, and many of our games, many of the self-schedule games can no longer be played prior to prelim weekend. We're going to move all of them to prelim weekend. So we'll just include them in the actual schedule for May 15th through 17th. We understand that that's going to put 3 games on a weekend, which that was the whole purpose of the self-schedule, was to try to split those out. But under the circumstances, it's going to be more fair to have everybody playing all together than just the handful of teams that maybe could get their one-off game scheduled. So that's probably the biggest change there. Due to the fact that we'll be writing the schedules in conjunction with the Challenge Cup change, the schedule release dates being moved out to April 17th for the prelim schedule. Again, now everyone's roster will freeze on May 8th. So that's not a real change there. And then the dates, of course, stay the same, and everything's getting played at Grand Park. Again, just a reminder, no game times are being changed for State Cup. We're good there still. And again, coaches have got to be able to take care of, or clubs got to be able to manage if they've got coaches with conflicts, because we'll do the best we can, but there's not a lot that we'll be able to do after the schedule's published. We won't be changing games after the schedule's published. Okay. Memorial Cup, Due to the facility capacity this time, because we're moving all of Challenge Cup to finals weekend, the major change for our Memorial Cup is we're going to move the event, just pick the entire event up and move it over to Zionsville. Zionsville has already graciously agreed to host for us, and we'll just pick it up and move it over there. We did change a couple dates. We did extend the registration date out a week and a few more days for the entry fees to be paid, but pretty much that should remain intact as is. And just a reminder, note that if Memorial Cup teams want to pull out, this is the same as always. This isn't really a change. As long as they withdraw before the schedule's released, if they withdraw by May 9th, then they would not lose their entry fee. We'd be sending that back to them. Okay. Sanctioned tournaments. These are the invitational tournaments that our different clubs in the state host. Please know that it's up to each tournament to decide whether they're going to cancel or postpone with their sanctioning. Indiana Soccer, so far all of our clubs are actually following the government rules that the state, federal, and Indiana Soccer has put out. We'll keep our Indiana Soccer webpage updated as we learn of the cancellations and postponements, so you can always check there. Whatever refund policies there are about the events, that is 100% up to the event owners. So you'd have to check with them if you have a question about that. As far as out-of-state tournaments go, same thing. The event owners, the clubs, they own the events. They're responsible for whatever the policies are for refunds, etc. You'd have to check with them. What we're going to do in the meantime, Indiana Soccer, we're going to continue to process your travel permission forms. That way, when the play suspension is lifted, there won't be a rush to get documents for those events, should you still be able to travel off to your tournaments. We're going to go ahead and keep that current for you, so the documents are in place. So that's all I have for the tournaments and cups. I'm going to flip it over to George now.
Hello, everybody. You know, as with everything, all the Indiana Soccer Leagues, ISL, ECI, YSL, and NESSL that we help facilitate are all suspended through the 15th. In GOT Soccer, we have moved all scheduled games through April 15th to being postponed. We've encouraged teams to reach out to their opponent to come to an agreement of when to reschedule the game. We are allowing league play to go through basically the end of June, June 28th, which is the last Sunday of June that we have, so teams can reschedule league play going through there. To reschedule games, just have people submit a support ticket. There's a webinar on the ISL website on how to write a support ticket, but you want to be sure that people use this season's event, ISL Spring 2020, all ages and divisions. Be sure to include the game number, proposed date, time, and location. And also remind your coaches and your managers that you can only have one support ticket open for any one team. So if there's multiple games, they just need to add the additional games on the same support ticket. Just be sure to include the game number each time so we can see that there is definitely addressing separate separate games within the same support ticket. Teams will be able to schedule 2 11v11 games on the same date. This is just a modification that we're doing for this season only. So they can have one game on Friday, one game on Saturday, one game on Sunday. They can play up to 3 games if they want to on that weekend. Again, a modification from the old 2 games per weekend. They may have 2 games on Saturday and 1 on Sunday, or 1 game on Saturday and 2 games on Sunday. Anytime they are having 2 games on the same date, we're looking to try to have, as always with a 9v9, a minimum of 3 hours between the end of the first game and the beginning of the second game. And we're saying 4 hours between the end of the first game and beginning of the second game for an 11v11 game. So hopefully people can coordinate additional games into the smaller period of time that they might have. As far as the change fees that we've always had in place, we're obviously not going to have change fees for games that are involved, games that were postponed during this time. We're also going to make sure that if two clubs that are very close to each other that are scheduled to play on a Saturday or Sunday, and they would like to move that game to a midweek date so they can accommodate games on the weekend with teams that have to travel further, or they would have to travel further, none of those games will have any change fees assessed to them. So that will not be an issue for anyone as far as how that piece is going. So we will obviously work as quickly as we can to update any changes to the schedules that you put in through your support tickets. And if you need any questions just about league play, certainly reach out to me. And I'll move this back over to Dave, I believe. Or no, wait a second. I think I've got one more thing. My apologies. As we had last year, we have the early commitment that players can do when we're going forward, getting ready for tryouts and all that kind of stuff. Early commitments may happen as early as May 1st or anytime thereafter. Again, what an early commitment is a family that is already in your club that is looking to stay within your club. In order to do so, they need to sign and date a commitment form. In that form, they must include the option for release prior to the start of tryouts that the club will provide, and they must pay a minimum of a $25 deposit to the club. If that family is looking to earn a release from their early commitment, my family has already committed my child to play for your club, but we've decided they'd like to try out for another club. They may do so by sending the information, written request to your club's board of directors or the Indiana Soccer registrar. And this has to be done prior to the tryout date for that player. Okay, until the release is granted, the player may not try out for another club. And that release comes from Indiana Soccer after we've gotten approval from everybody else. If the player is granted a release from the early commitment, the club they committed to must refund any monies paid that exceeds the minimum deposit of $25. If they've paid more, or if the club chooses, they can always refund the full amount, including the $25. Based on the fact that the league will extend through June 28th, we want to make sure that we have tryouts that begin for the most part after play is completed. We are going to be moving the tryouts for the 10 and under younger players that can begin Wednesday, June 24th, and certainly any time after. For the 11U and older players, the tryouts may begin Monday, June 29th. And FYI, the IHSA moratorium is June 29th to July 5th, where they're not allowed to train. I've communicated this with the High School Coaches Association's board and stuff like that, and they see these times as working out for them as well. So new tryout dates for this year only, June 24th. Contact may still happen after Cup Finals weekend, as we've always had. I think it's June 1st right now, as it is on the calendar. So clubs can be contacting players after that time at another club. And then the tryouts, and that's when the commitments take place, either June 24th for the 10 and unders or after June 29th for the 11U and older. And I'll let Dave Guthrie finish this off for us, please.
Okay, well, again, thank you guys. Keep in mind that I think you need to roll up maybe one screen, maybe not. Anyway, again, we want to thank you. Know that we are doing everything we can to make sure that we have a spring season. We realize the ramifications should we lose the spring season. So we're doing all that we can. What you've just heard is based on what we currently know about the suspension of activities based on the governor's request. Should that change, we have a plan B, and we'll be having another meeting and we'll express what that plan B is. And we'll continue to have a plan B until at some point there's no other option but to lose the season. But keep in mind that your staff is more than doing everything they can to be able to make sure we have the full season this year. A couple of other additional things. If you have paid employees with your clubs, there's conflicting information that's coming out about laying somebody off before or laying somebody off after April 2nd and the ramifications of doing one before or after. I would ask you to get with an accountant that does have some payroll expertise, or at least know what happens with employee benefits and how that impacts the club. Obviously, I know each club wants to be fair in what they do and how they manage their employees, but there are some ramifications that are different before and after April 2nd based on what's currently being announced. That's outside my bandwidth to be able to tell you exactly what that is, but I would ask that you investigate that, and they may change the April 2nd deadline. But all that's been negotiated with Congress right now. So I'd urge you to take a look at that. And it may be premature, and hopefully it is premature, but if a club finds themselves financially strained, that I know that that Congress has made additional monies available to the SBA, Small Business Administration, and not-for-profits do fall under the SBA, and those monies would be available to a not-for-profit. So should a club be financially in trouble as a result of this, you can see on the screen that there's a couple of links where they can send you to go have a conversation with the SBA. And again, as I said earlier, should things change, and again, say the government comes out and adds another couple of weeks,